What's up, adventurers? My name is Platinum Phoenix, and welcome to an update of sorts. Almost exactly 11 months ago, I released a video called The Ultimate Guide to Statuses for the original Fossil Fighters. And now that we are all the way through the sequel game, Fossil Fighters Champions, I decided to release a sequel episode of sorts to that episode because we have more Vivisaurs to talk about, more statuses to talk about, and more exceptions. So, if you like this style of episode, make sure to let me know by liking, commenting, and subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, welcome to A Champion's Guide to Statuses. Statuses, because we've talked a lot about them, but I've never actually gone through and explained all of them. And since we have a lot of time here, I thought it was a good place to actually go over them. So, the first status I want to go over, and the first statuses I want to go over, are actually the positive statuses, because they are a lot more straightforward than the negative statuses. So the first status effect is Inflame, and it has two versions, a silver and a gold version, which the gold version is called Super Inflame. But the silver version raises attack by 20 while lowering defense by 5. And there are 8 Vivisaurs with Inflame, being the V-Raptor, the V-Riptor, the V-Ripper, the Shuno, Tricera, Heracles, Brontoth, Lagia, and Tanzilla in the form of Quiver, which effectively works the exact same way as Inflame. And then the gold version of Inflame raises attack by 40 points and lowers defense by 10. And there are 7 Vivisaurs with Super Inflame, being Arceus, Andorange, Peloro, Colant, Igno in the form of Roaring Fire, Dynel in the form of Rex Roar, and then Tanzilla in the form of its skill Inflame plus S, which allows it to enter the battle with Super Inflame attached to it. And Inflame is actually interesting in the positive statuses because it is the only one that requires you to lower a stat in order to raise another stat. So, raising attack while lowering defense, while none of the other positive skills actually lowered any stat at all. But the next status effect is Harden, which also has 2 versions, a silver and a gold version. The silver version raises defense by 30 points, and there are 17 Vivisaurs with Harden, being Spinax, Giga Spinax, Salto, Lexo, Ankylo, Galgaron, Pelto, Xanath, Pachorino, Boldor, Argento, Shenliu, Chasmo, Blitzagon, Titanus, Gondry, and Frigi in the form of Frozen Armor. And this is the positive stat that has the most Vivisaurs that have it. So most Vivisaurs that have a positive stat will have Harden in replacing any other positive stat they could have. But the next one is the gold version of Harden, which raises defense by 50 points, and there are only 8 Vivisaurs with Super Harden, which are Yango, Didomio, Proto, Paki, Shalon, Gomp, Dunkel, and B. Tricera. And then there are 2 Vivisaurs that start with Harden due to having the Harden Plus skill, being Parapu and Gondry. Next up is Quicken. And like the other 2, there are 2 versions of Quicken, being a silver and a gold. And the silver version raises speed by 30%. And it has 8 Vivisaurs that have it, being Venator, Nitrous, Dilafo, Hoplo, Crypto, Epidex, Perarium, and Tophus. And then Super Quicken, or the gold version, raises speed by 70%, and there are 10 Vivisaurs with it, being the M-Raptor, the O-Raptor Fiend, Dimorph, Dimorph Ace, Plesio, Marple, B, Plesio, Raptin, and then there's one that is a spoiler because it is a type of Vivisaur we have not seen yet. And honestly, Quicken is probably my least favorite of the positive status effect that you can give, because it is not the best at boosting, since it is a percentage and not point based. And most of the Vivisaurs you would want to speed up, aka your upfront attacking Vivisaurs, tend to have lower speed, so boosting them by a percent is not as good as saying giving them 20 points, like Harden and Inflame does. But there are also 3 Vivisaurs that gain Quicken due to the Quicken Plus skill at the start of battle, being Tarata, Daiklo, and Anomalo. And then the next positive status effect that we can give is the counter status effect. And once again, it has 2 versions, a silver and a gold. The silver version has the effect of 70% chance to reflect the damage back to the opponent. So you take 0 and your opponent that just hit you will take the damage. There are 10 Vivisaurs with this, and the skill is almost always called Payback. And those Vivisaurs are Delta, Igwa, Hibigon, Orano, Paraloff, Mihu, Megath, Aloro, Nippono, and Duna. And then the gold version has a 100% chance of reflecting damage back to the opponent, meaning you can literally not be damaged if you have this status effect on you. But there are only 5 Vivisaurs with the status that, with the gold version of counter, being the 5 elemental chickens, being Wick, Squirk, Squirth, Squilk, and Squirro. And all of them have the skill Karmic Aura, which is the only way to get the gold version of counter. And both of these have actually been buffed from the original, going from 40 and 50% respectively to the 70 and 100% that is in this game. And 2 Vivisaurs start with Payback due to Counter Plus, which are Desmo and Radax. And the last positive status effect that can be given is the Charge status effect. And unlike the other positive status effects, Charge only has 1 version, and that 1 version boosts the damage of the next attack of the Vivisaur by 250%, which is crazy and is really good. It only, like I said, it's the only version of the status, and it only affects the Vivisaur that is actually using the skill. So unlike the other statuses that can be given to your allies, the Vivisaur that uses Charge is the one that is inflicted with Charge. And there are 7 Vivisaurs with the Charge skill, being Raja, Giga Raja, Anan, Dimetro, Lugboss, Desmo, and Salada. And next up are the negative status effects. And these are much more nuanced than the positive status effects. So I'm changing up how I'm actually talking about them. I'll be explaining how each of the status effects work as a whole, and then I break them down into their individual components. And because a lot more Vivisaurs are able to inflict negative status effects rather than positive status effects, I'm not going to be listing every single Vivisaur that has the negative status effect, except for very unique circumstances. So, the first negative status effect is Poison/Venom. And Poison and Venom damages the inflicted Vivisaur by a percentage of its max life points at the end of its next turn. So it is 1 turn duration, and it affects it based on max life points, not current life points. The silver version of Poison does 15% of the max life points. The gold version does 30% of the max life points. And then the Venom version, or the purple version, does half of the maximum life, which is crazy. And also, the silver version has 31 Vivisaurs with it. The gold versions have 21 Vivisaurs with it. And Venom has 1 Vivisaur that can inflict Venom, being the U-Raptor, specifically with its U-Venom skill that has a 20% chance of inflicting the Venom effect. And since it is based on percentages of max life points, Poison is actually really good at helping low attack Venusaurs deal damage and dealing damage to high defense Venusaurs, because the low attack Venusaurs don't have to worry about actually dealing damage since it's based on percentages, and defense isn't calculated into the percentage because it's just going off of max life points, so it ignores defense entirely. And Bonysaurs are actually immune to the poison effect, so don't try to poison any of the PP Brigade's Venusaurs. But next up is the sleep status, and sleep will always be a maximum of a 1-turn duration, regardless of which type of sleep they have. And sleep always lowers the Venusaur's speed to 0, meaning that they cannot avoid attacks while they are asleep. And the silver version of sleep, the only difference is the amount of attacks it takes to wake them up. So the silver version takes 1 attack to wake up, and there are 12 Venusaurs with the silver sleep skill. And the gold version requires 2 attacks to wake up the sleeping Venusaur, and there are only 8 Venusaurs with a gold sleep skill. And on top of that, Venusaurs with the skill Sleepy enter the battlefield with the gold version of sleep inflicted to them, meaning they have to take 2 hits that first turn if you don't go first in order for them to act on your first turn. And there is a type of Venusaur that is immune to sleep, but it is a spoiler, so I will not be saying what the type of Venusaur is. Just know that there is a type of Venusaur that is immune to it, and when I eventually make this into a standalone video, I will make sure to switch out the spoiler alert for the type of Venusaur. But next up is the Scare status. And Scare lasts for 2 turns, regardless of the type, and it prevents Venusaurs from using some of their skills. The only difference in the 2 types is that the amount of skills that are sealed off. The silver version of Scare seals off 2 skills, and there are 25 Venusaurs with a Scare skill, silver Scare skill, and the gold version seals off 3 skills, effectively making a Venusaur dead because 3 skills is basically all they have, and only 9 Venusaurs have a gold Scare skill. And to be specific on how it seals away skills, the Scare status seals skills randomly when the Venusaur is inflicted, and that is the case even if it was already inflicted with Scare. So if a Venusaur is scared and gets scared again, the skills that are sealed are randomly selected again. And then Bonysaurs and the spoiler type of Venusaurs are immune to the Scare effect. So don't try to use this on any special type of Venusaurs. But next up is the Excite status. And Excite lasts for 2 turns and prevents manual rotation of your Venusaurs, meaning you cannot change where they are positioned. But it does not prevent rotation from rotation skills, so you getting hit by a skill that rotates you, or from battlefield effects like Ilium's Battlefield, where it's slippery ice and it rotates you every turn. It does not prevent that either. And the silver version actually has nothing unique about it. It does have 23 Venusaurs with it, however, but the gold version is actually much better because it may cause the Venusaur inflicted with it and the team of Venusaurs to randomly rotate at the start of the inflicted Venusaur's turn, which is crazy because you basically inflict them with the battlefield effect from Ilium. And it's just way more useful because it prevents them from rotating back still, but it can get them into really bad positions. Say if they have a good attacking Venusaur up front with bad support skills, and it rotates them to the back. And there are only 12 Venusaurs with the gold Excite skill. But next up is the Confuse status, which, like most of the others, has a 2-turn effect. And Confused Vivisaurs will always act at the start of the turn before other Vivisaurs can act. So it will always act before you're able to do anything else on your turn. And the silver version, and both versions actually, will allow them to attack random opponents or rarely do nothing at all. And they still use the FP of the skill that would have been used. So it's likely also wasting your FP on top of that. And there are 23 Vivisaurs with a silver Confuse skill. But the gold Confuse skill is where it really gets bad, because the affected Vivisaur can also attack anyone now, which includes their allies or themselves. And something funny, actually, I found out while researching this, is that confused Vivisaurs with the gold confused status can use FP steal skills on their own allies, but if they do, the game just removes the FP and then puts it right back, which is really funny. But there are only 14 Vivisaurs with the gold confused skill. And then next up is the Enrage status, which, again, like most of the others, has a 2-turn effect. And it lowers accuracy while raising attack. It is the only negative status to work the same as in Flame, but basically backwards, where the bigger stat is the negative instead of the positive. So the silver version of Enrage has accuracy lowered by 30 points while attack is increased by 10, and only 20 Vivisaurs have the silver Enrage skill. And then the gold Enrage skill has accuracy decreased by 35 points while attack is increased by 20. And there are only 11 Vivisaurs with the gold Enrage skill. And basically, this is their version of Swagger from Pokemon, where it makes it harder for you to get hit, but if you are hit, it will deal more damage. But the last negative effect that we are going to be going over is Infection. And Infection is an interesting status because there is no indicator of it. But what Infection does is that it KOs a Vivisaur in 4 turns after it becomes infected. And unlike other statuses, it count increases at the beginning of the Vivisaur's turn rather than at the end of the Vivisaur's turn, like every other status, which basically effectively gives it 3 moves instead of the 4 that it would sound like. If a Vivisaur is infected more than once also, the counter is reset to 4, so it doesn't make sense to infect a Vivisaur and then try to infect it again. But like I said, there is no indication of infection other than the word infection timer activated at the bottom of the screen and a timer at the start of the Vivisaur's turn telling you that it is counting down. Infection is also interesting compared to the other statuses because it is incurable, meaning nothing can cure it, and that Vivisaur is dead in 4 turns. There is also the spoiler type of Vivisaur that is immune to infection, but we haven't seen them yet, so basically nothing we've seen so far is immune. And there's only 2 Vivisaurs that have an infection skill, being Crypto and the E-Raptor, both of which we've already seen and talked about. But the last thing I actually want to talk about are actually 2 skills that relate pretty heavily to statuses. Those being Rallying Cry and Neutralize. Rallying Cry basically allows you to target a Vivisaur and remove all negative status effects from that targeted Vivisaur. The exceptions being Infection will not be cured from it, and it does not remove positive status effects such as Inflame, Harden, and Quicken. So you can use it without worrying about the good status effects being removed. Just don't try to use it on Infection. And there are 18 Vivisaurs that have Rallying Cry as a skill. And then Neutralize works the exact same way as Rallying Cry, except it works on the entire team rather than a targeted Vivasaur. And there are only 3 Vivasaurs with the Neutralize skill, being Colo, Pipsy, and Maya, which has Null Song, which is just neutralized rename.